The following program was provided by an independent producer solely responsible for its content. The opinions expressed do not necessarily represent the views of this station, its staff, board of directors, or underwriters.
Hello, and welcome to People's View. We're going into our legislative discussion format this time, and I'm Carl Seidel, a four-term representative from Ward 1 on Public Works. And
Kevin Scully, one-term state rep from Ward 6 in Nashua.
My name is David Schoeneman. I was two-term alderman from Ward 3 here in Nashua.
so we have people with experience that know both statewide and city. And we got lots to talk about. The budget came out this week. The Democrats showed that their budget was much different than what the governor has submitted. There's a lot of things that were taken out of the budget. A lot of things that they've added to their the Democrats' budget. They've done things that show, for example, that they're going to stop the cuts in the business tax. You know, no more quarter of a point or whatever, even though we're getting excess money coming in from doing that. People were investing, their business was growing, and they were paying more money at a lower rate. And for some reason, they are saying that, oh, we have to stop that. That can't continue. And what they've done is they've even shown a loss in income by keeping the rate the same. I don't know how they can justify that, but they're talking about, you know, millions of dollars difference in that.
So the first thing that they want to do is they want to cut revenues by increasing taxes or by suspending
the cuts,
the tax decrease. And there just seems to be this desire on their part to penalize those who are successful. But the ones who are successful, the ones who are contributing to this economy and making funds available through the rates that they are paying that fund these other programs that they want to do. So on the one hand, we have them cutting the revenues by imposing a penalty because they just don't like people succeeding, I can assume. And on the other hand, they're trying to increase spending. So they're decreasing revenue, increasing spending, creating a wider gap.
Well, their whole total numbers is an increase of 13% over the current budget. I don't see how that's going to go through. And I really think that's what's going to happen. Is going to be one hullabaloo and maybe just a continuing resolution to keep us, you know, at the end of June, they're supposed to have a new budget. If they don't, it goes back to the old budget or the current budget. And I think that this is somewhat similar to what you were saying earlier in 2011 when we went in there and we had the same thing that they had the Democratic governor presented a budget that was much higher. But it was only 11 billion then, 11 billion. And we had to go in there. That was when we Republicans were able to cut back on the spending and bring it down and balancing it with income.
The irony there, I think, being that, so we made the hard choices, brought everything back into balance again. And I think, correct me if I'm wrong, but we were actually punished as a party because we pulled everything back.
That's right. We balanced the budget and put money in the rainy days fund, and we didn't do well in the next election.
It just shows the old truism that it's so much harder to cut a entitlement program once you've created it than to not do it at all. And that's where I think we're starting to get into trouble again, where they are looking to increase the size of government, and it never seems to get smaller. You were unbelievably, unbelievably, you were successful in doing that in 2011. But look what happened as a result. People said, "Oh my God, you can't take that." Well, you never should have had it to begin with.
Right. And one of the things that we're, sorry, go ahead.
Well, the other thing I just want to say is, and to my liberal friends out there, this is one of the things I have a hard time wrapping my head around. As a group, you are so big on sustainability. why not sustainable government?
Right,
You know,
right.
in terms of it growing at a slow enough rate such that won't exceed the amount of revenue that you bring in without putting in usurious tax rates.
Right.
But not only do they increase taxes and other fees, but they increase the number of people that they have to collect those taxes and to write the regulations. There's over 100 new positions are in the budget.
Right.
They want to introduce a benefit again without negotiation. It's going to be a benefit that they just give all the workers for the state of parental leaves for whatever, and that's going to be paid by an income tax, people,
Yeah.
0.5% income tax, and they give the right of raising that rate to balance the books, to pay for the insurance for that, to somebody who isn't elected. It was just one of the employees running the show.
Well, I think it's a brilliant strategy because, you know, like who wants to say no to, you know, helping families that
That's
are in
right.
trouble? But that is the justification to build the mechanism to collect
Yes.
the income tax from all of us forever.
Right.
And-
that won't go away.
and
That
do-
definitely won't go
And
away.
do you think, I mean, you tell me, is it going to stop with family medical leave?
No.
Or will people just look at that and go, well, hey, if we only raise that income tax by 1% more,
Who
think
would
of all the
complain?
good-
Right.
And it'll,
Exactly.
the next
And
term,
we'll handle the education problem. Okay, the education, the building problem. Well, what about the pension problem? I mean, you're probably less than 20% liquid in that pension fund. You know, that's something that. And what else? You know, they're adding a tax on your capital gains. That's another one that's gone in there. That's going to go along with your interest and dividends tax that we've been trying to get rid of because, in a sense, that's an income tax also.
Right. Well, it's funny. I mean, I am not native to New Hampshire. I
Right.
moved here, you know, 35 years ago, and I moved to escape the People's Republic of Massachusetts. And I like to think I embraced the whole concept of live free and die, the idea of limited government, people taking care of themselves, neighbors helping neighbors, you know, and families helping each other, but not with this type of reliance on government. And what we're seeing now is, to me, it's a shifting in that mindset now where people are no longer looking to themselves and their friends to take care of the problems. They want this daddy, you know, this constructed daddy to come in and take care of all of their problems and their issues. And they don't seem to be able to connect the fact that you want them to do all these things. Where does the money come from to pay it? I remember I was knocking on doors, and I had a woman who moved up from Pennsylvania, and she started saying, "Well, my God, I moved here to Nashua, and you don't have rides for, you know, the elderly, or you don't have public transportation, you know." She went down this whole list. And she said, "Well, I did move here because the taxes were a lot lower." And
Right.
you know, and like again, obviously you don't want to say.
The light came on.
I'm hoping to get this person's vote, so I'm trying to be as politic as possible. But I'm trying to say, yes, because you have all of these things where really aren't necessities,
Right.
but somebody's got to pay for them. Of course, the money's going to end up coming from your pocket.
Well, the other thing that bothers me just as much is that all these programs are one supplier, no competition in there, and it doesn't usually give you a choice. You know, that's one of the things. I'm up here because freedom, choice, you know, those are
Right.
magic words in New Hampshire. And I think that we have to have competition in there in order for you to make sure your error is bad. I mean, Medicare can accept a X% error. They don't care because we're all paying for the errors. I don't see them trying to make sure that all the claims that they have to pay are valid, are honest, you know, and everything like that. I don't know if you saw that thing in 60 Minutes about 3 years ago in Florida, how they had 50% of the payments they were making to instrument companies down there were fraudulent.
Oh my goodness.
But where is the disincentive? I mean, really, at the end of the day, when you have a government program and they spend more than
Right.
they should, that's justification for asking for even more.
That's right.
Sure.
And of course, they can get it because they can go to the deep pockets of Whitmill. I don't think our pockets are as deep as they think they are.
Well,
And
they
start
keep
reaching in
trying
there for
until
more.
the blood starts, I guess. I don't know.
Yeah.
But let's make sure that New Hampshire at least starts to correct that. I don't know how the governor's going to treat it, but I imagine there's going to be a big fight on vetoes.
Let's talk about that for 1 second.
Sure.
If the House budget passes, if it gets to the governor's desk and he vetoes it, are there enough votes, do you think, to override his veto?
I don't think so.
Okay, so this may be largely bluff. I mean, we have very, very short election cycles here in New Hampshire. Everyone's up in 2 years. And so this could just be trying to prep for 2020 to allow the Democrats to label the Republicans as
Yeah.
X, Y, or Z. You know, you hate this, or you hate this, or you're a racist, or
Again,
whatever.
that's it.
So it's just pure politics. There may not actually be anyone in the Democrat Party who's seriously thinking this budget is good. I just wonder about that.
I think that you're right. I think they are doing that. They're very good at bluffing like that, and trying to make changes at the last minute. I think we have to watch out for that too, because you might feel you have to do a little horse trading, as they say. You give me that, I'll give you this, and
Well, it's interesting because I'm not sure that. What I'm happy to say is it does look like the Republican minority, the group, is much more cohesive than the Republican Party was in the previous term
Sure.
when I was
That's
up
good.
there. I mean, I really had come to the conclusion that although we were the majority party in the last session, effectively the Democrats were controlling the House because there were enough. And again, I hate to use that term rhino, but there were enough Republicans who were siding too many times with the Democrat and the Democrat agenda, and there were things that we should have been able to do, we couldn't do. And I drove home on more than one day shaking my head saying, what the heck just happened? Now, so the good news for me is, although we are now the minority party, it does seem that as although the group is smaller, they are much more cohesive and unified. And I think that they will sustain the governor's vetoes. Thank goodness for us.
yeah, I
I
think
sure hope that's the case, but there is a lot of bluffing on the other side, and it could be that some of those Republicans will fall for that trap. I hope that's not the case, but some of the things that the Democrats say are just so outrageous, accusations and whatnot, that people just tend to cave if they don't have a strong core.
Now, the upside to this is if the governor vetoes, and I assume and hope he will, and it's upheld, then the tax cuts to businesses will continue, right? The ones that are scheduled.
no, because they cancel that any increases.
Yeah, but
Unless he vetoes that.
Yes, yeah. Well,
I
I
thought
think
you
he'll-
meant the budget, just the budget. No,
Okay,
but
so,
for the
yes.
separate things, yeah, whatever they pass, he has to, as a legislature, he has to veto if he doesn't, if it affects what he wants to do.
I think he'll veto any kind of reform on the tax, any
Well,
change to what was done in the
Definitely,
past.
I mean, he's
because
already said
it's
that.
clearly
Yeah, he would
benefiting the state.
veto the family parental insurance.
Right.
Good.
Because he has a private sector alternative. I
Well,
mean, it's
he
not
has an
that-
alternative, yeah, and that gives you a choice. You don't have to join that one. The other,
But I
one,
think they're going to offer it free to state employees too, right? Public employees.
That
I'm not
bothered
wild
me,
about
yeah,
that part.
yeah.
I think that's a mistake.
I think so too. But if at least it's a private insurance type of
Right.
thing, so
Right.
it's going to be competitive at least in making sure there's less fraud than you should have. But we'll have to see because it's not being explained right now. I think there's a lot of things that this is the time where the Senate bills are in the House and the House bills are in the Senate. So, oh, you want me to pass your bill? You got to pass my bill, and stuff like that. It's going to be very, very interesting for everybody listening to us or to listen to some of the stuff that we'll be bringing up in the next couple of weeks as we listen to our compatriots up there in Concord.
Well, the good news is, if the governor vetoes the budget and he vetoes the rollback of the tax cuts
Right.
to business, things will continue as we are. We'll
Right.
continue to run a surplus.
Right.
Right. All of the vital function of government will continue to be performed, and we'll have even more money in the bank that we can use, I hope, to cut taxes.
Ideally,
even
you're
further.
right. The problem is, though, the threat of what could happen, or the fact that the industry is going to worry about what happens in 2020. Do we get a supermajority of the Democrats, and then they run everything? So then they might not be as anxious to expand their business, to bring in more business. They might be a little cautious right
Well,
now.
we won't know till 20. I mean, actually,
No, I just bring that up
yeah.
because you're thinking that you're going to get the big surpluses again, and that would be nice if the attitude was that we're going to continue along this path.
If the surplus comes from working harder,
Yeah.
I think that we'll get it. If it comes from continued investment in the state, we may not, because I think you're absolutely right. Any business that's going to be looking to a state, wanting to kind of get a sense of what their business climate is, isn't going to just look at what has happened. They're going to look at what is being proposed. And if we have a majority in the House and a majority in the Senate proposing to increase taxes and spend more money, really, which harms an economy, and we have only one person standing between success and failure, or guarding the successes we already have, and that being Governor Sununu, someone's going to really think hard about, do I want to invest in the continuing occupancy of that seat by that one guy, because everything hinges on his reelection if he chooses to run.
It'll be interesting to see, because I do remember that when Barack Obama was elected president, the stock market tanked and the layoffs began.
Right.
Because businesses were already taking into consideration what the economic climate was going to be going forward.
Right.
And that's when they had the Great Recession. Well, businesses, being smart people working in their own self-interests, are saying, I'm not going to leave myself out on a limb here to have it sawed off behind me and destroy it. So they started pulling back, and things got worse because they could anticipate what the legislative climate was going to be. So I think the same thing's going to happen here. When we have that 2020 election, to me, is pivotal. If the people choose to send back a Democrat majority, then I think we're going to, after seeing what they're trying to do during this 2-year period, then I'd say New Hampshire has changed.
Yeah, and I mean, they're doing the other things too. The fees and regulations, they're increasing again. Any place that there's money to be had, they're finding it, or they're at least attempting to find it.
Yeah, they're trying to take it, is what they're trying to do.
Yeah.
And I think that doesn't bode well for anybody who lives here, really. We have just a property tax. We see in this budget that they want to bring in an income tax. They want to bring in capital gains tax. We know that they're just reaching for anything they can possibly grab.
Right.
And anyone who's got anything that could be grabbed has got to be asking themselves, what are the other states out there, and where might there be a more favorable climate for me to invest or to settle down?
There were a couple of things too on the medical side that I'm a little bit worried about. The biggest thing was the taking out of that medical facility for problem children. Right now they're being handled at the prison up there in Concord, and that's only because that's the only one that has a enough safety for these people who are a little bit could be a little bit unstable, and it's a shame to see something like that. It wasn't a big chunk of money.
Right, the governor wanted to build a separate facility.
That's right.
That would be more appropriate, because they're not prisoners.
Yeah,
But they're being treated like
They're being treated like
and the
prisoners.
family of those people who go to see them are being treated like.
We were worried about that way back in 2008. And we finally got something organized, and they're really going after the treatment, the proper treatment, all the way through from children to adults. And they're doing something that they should have been doing a long time ago.
Well, I hate to be cynical. I hope that wasn't pulled out to use as a hostage bargaining chip.
Yeah, it could be. It could be. That's a big, very visible thing that the governor hit right away.
Yes.
Right away, because that was one of his, that was where he was taking some of the funding for a one-time building, Okay, let's put that in there. And And,
Well, you would think that everyone would be on board with that, with all the focus on mental health these days.
Right.
That should be
Hi.
easily, easy nonpartisan agreement on that. But there's not,
Mm-hmm.
because, like I said before, I think everyone's looking forward to 2020. They want to be able to cast labels and
So
play those games.
I hope
It's
our
all
listeners
politics.
are going to contact their representative and talk to them about some of these things here. Get to know a little bit more. That you can go to the website and see which bills are going to be voted on this week
Mhm.
and next week. There's going to be quite a lot of them, so we got to worry about that. This is the big one that's going through. It's the budget this year, plus the capital expense budget, which is HB 220. No, 25.
Can I
Go ahead.
put a plug in for one of the websites?
Sure.
I think that the New Hampshire Liberty Alliance
Uh-huh.
is an excellent website because they actually publish a voting guide, which
Uh-huh.
is really made for the legislators, but I think it'd be a great thing for the average person to see too. And it's called the gold standard. When they print it, it's actually gold. I printed it this way because it's black and white and it's cheaper because I'm using my money. But it's a great little thing too, because what it does is it gives summaries of the bills. Because it's very hard for some people to be able to wade through the legalese. And I think that they do a pretty good job, and it's not just one person's opinion, it's actually vetted to see if they agree with what their take on the bill is. And I think it's a great way for people to get a handle on not only the language of the bill, they get a good working summary, but the potential consequences of the bill should it be passed. So in this case, I have here, this is the gold standard that is for Thursday, April 11th, which is tomorrow for the voting day. And it's HB1 and HB2, which are the budgets. And in this case, they're saying nay to ought to pass. And they're giving their reasons why for both of those bills, we should not be voting for them as is. So I think it's a great thing for folks. It's so hard. I mean, if you're out there, trying to earn a living and take care of your family and everything else, to really stay down here in the bug dust of the politics. So I'm big on trying to find good, easy summaries.
What's their website? So people
I think
can
it's
go to it.
it's
Just called the
it's
Liberty Alliance.
NH Liberty, one
Okay.
word, nhliberty.org.
Okay,
So
Great.
I'd say go check it out. Okay.
good.
Good.
No, that's a good piece of information. What about the local budget? Anybody want to go into that? Nashua?
We can talk about some of the things that are happening locally.
Okay.
One of them, we shared this article. This is in today's Telegraph, April 7th, actually yesterday's Telegraph. It's by George Farrington. It's titled, "It's Time for the Board of Education Members to Put Differences Aside and Get the Job Done." Very interesting editorial. George Farrington, of course, was on the Board of Education for a while, did a very good job there. And he recently settled out of court a lawsuit that he filed against the superintendent of schools here and the city for character assassination or those kinds of things. I don't know all the details about it, but it was a very unfortunate situation, bad behavior on part of some of the school administration personnel. And
By the way, how much are we paying?
I think you settled for $60,000.
Taxpayers, it's us.
It is us, but it's a penalty
Well,
for bad behavior.
Yeah.
And I don't fault
mean,
George for doing that. I fault the guy who committed the bad behavior.
Yeah.
Well,
And
that's a superintendent.
That's
then.
the superintendent, and it shouldn't happen. George's article here, he's talking about the dynamics that he sees on the board. He's not really even talking about his suit, but if someone's heard his name recently, it could be associated with that. One of the things he points out in here is a study that was done that analyzed the characteristics of successful boards versus boards that don't do very well, looking across the country. And one of the things it says that I resonated right away. It says that one of the characteristics of a board that does not do well is that they are focused on external pressures as the main reason for lack of student success, such as poverty, lack of parental support, societal factors, or lack of motivation. And I heard that all the time. Whenever the budget for the city came out and we took a look at schools, they always said, well, we're not doing so well. And I would always point out, well, we're in the bottom third of the state. Sometimes they would say, well, we're doing great, but bottom third of the state. And by whose measure is bottom third of the state performing well? Not mine. But I always heard other aldermen or school board members saying, well, we've got a lot of poor families. We've got a lot of English language learners, this kind of thing. And that may all be true, but one of the characteristics that this study showed was that boards that focus on those external reasons
Right.
for poor performance are the boards
Those
that
are
don't succeed.
excuses, yeah.
And that's what's happening
Yeah,
in Nashua.
right.
We have a school board, school administration that focuses and points the blame to someone else. I would say, well, let's not blame the poor families. Let's not blame the immigrants for our problems.
Right.
And again, this is an issue where we don't have competition.
Right.
And so when there's no competition, you really, you thrive based on failure, because failure is what becomes justification for getting more money. And that's what everybody wants, is just more money. But the failure is never internally based. There's never any introspection. What are we doing wrong that we should be doing better, that can
Right.
get better results? It's always focused on the externals. So I thought that was very interesting. And that's something that I think that Nashua, the Nashua voters ought to really think about as they're looking at local politics. Where's the responsibility? Where's the taking of responsibility? I think the school board at $150 million per year, it's the biggest part of
Right.
the Nashua budget. The school board, I think the school administration should be looking internally instead of looking externally. And whenever folks are looking externally, we see results don't come in, good results don't come in, and this whole blame game is cause for voters at home to be very skeptical about how their money's being spent. $150 million, that's half of the budget. We have 11,000 kids. Our enrollment's been going down. The budget's been going up. Our schools are in the bottom third of the state. There's no excuse for that.
Right.
And certainly blaming English language learners or poor folks is not an excuse, not a valid excuse in my estimation. So those are the kinds of things that are going on, and voters should be very careful to look and listen to what they're hearing from their
Yeah,
city
the
leaders.
programs they have in those areas haven't really changed. You think if that's a problem, well, maybe we ought to try something a little different. What could we do with English language learners? Maybe give them a nice, monthly, a month of concentrated study of English language in the summer or something like that, so they're
Sure.
ready to start school in the fall and they can understand the teacher.
Kids learn language very easily. They acquire it just from using it.
That's right.
There was a good editorial today in the paper too, or in yesterday's, whatever date that was that you showed me earlier, by Fred T-Boom,
Uh-huh.
again in the Telegraph, when he talked about the English English language learners
Right.
and how that program is expanding. He said that one of the criteria of the new English language learners, teachers, is that they don't have to be knowledgeable of the language in which the student is apparently stuck.
Right.
So you don't have to have someone who speaks Spanish managing the English language learning for the kids who speak Spanish. And that sounds preposterous to me. And Fred talks about his experience as an immigrant
Right.
coming into the States and not having any knowledge of English, or very rudimentary knowledge of English, and actually helping translate for a kid who only spoke Spanish, because Fred knew more Spanish than he did English. And within 6 months, they were getting by. Within 9 months, they were doing well. Within a year, they were proficient.
Yeah.
And they didn't have this special class. They were just immersed and learning. And I will tell you something, too. I spent some time in Taiwan and some time in China as an adult. And my wife says, language isn't learned. It's just acquired.
Right.
And when I was riding the bus in China or in Taiwan, I would hear people say something, and then I'd see them do an action. And I would begin to associate
The
that
words.
sound with that action. And after a while, I was kind of getting it.
Isn't
And
that the way
I-
your baby learned?
That's what my son learns. Well, that's the way it works. And language is acquired.
That's right.
Especially if you're immersed in
That's
it,
right.
because I didn't have a Chinese teacher.
Right.
I was just listening to everybody talk. And as I listened to everybody speak, I began to acquire this language. And to the point where some other foreigner came into Taiwan and they said, wow, your Chinese is really good. And I ended up translating for this person.
Wow.
And I think, how's that possible? But you just sort of acquire it.
Yeah.
You acquire it by being immersed in it. And I learned faster by riding the bus and needing to know where to get on and off and
Yeah.
those kinds of things, how to make change, than I did sitting in a classroom. Because sitting in a classroom, you just, it's fake scenarios really. Whereas if you're out there learning or going to a restaurant and you want to order a meal and all that stuff, you have to do it. And I think that kids that come into this country who sit in a class where English is spoken,
Yeah.
they're going to acquire it.
Yeah.
They're just going to acquire it. They're going to pick it up. They're going to begin to make the associations between actions and objects and the words that they hear associated with them. And that's the way you learn. So I know from experience, that's the best way. And here we are trying to coddle these kids, really inflating the budget further, creating more jobs as one speaker at the microphone in the Aldermanic Chamber more than once said, our school department seems to be a jobs program. And we don't want that. We don't want to think that
That's
way.
right.
We really need to be thinking about the education for the students. And if we were focused, another thing this article says here, departments that truly do focus on the kids rather than focus on the kids as excuses for bad performance, the ones that really do focus on the kids can obtain success.
Right.
And so the school department could be raised, and we've said on this show before, there are plenty of examples of kids who come out of the public school system, going into a different public school, a charter school, and very, very quickly succeeding. Failing kid in this school succeeds in that environment. I'm not saying it's right for everybody, but clearly there's an approach that should be taken, I think, that charter schools take that are
Well, we have
School
two charter
boards.
schools here in Nashua that are doing very well.
they're
getting
among the
national
best in the
honors.
country.
Yeah.
So those are the things that are going on here. And we can also, I suppose, debate whether or not we should raise the age for smoking age in the city of Nashua.
Oh, I went to the aldermanic meeting last night. When
Okay.
that was being discussed. And it was interesting because there were a lot of different viewpoints that were provided and presented. Let me say for the record, I think smoking is bad.
Sure.
I don't want anybody to smoke. I never encourage my children, neither do. All right, so we get that out of the way. I think smoking is a bad idea. You shouldn't do it. But the idea that the city of Nashua can step in and say, we think this is bad. We're going to take the rights away from an emancipated adult.
Right.
Something that the federal government doesn't do or the state government doesn't do, but the city of Nashua can decide that and say to those people. And somebody pointed out to the mayor, he said, well, Mr. Mayor, you're talking about trying to get the younger crowd in here. You're going to try to get the younger crowd in at the same time you're saying you're an infant and you can't make your own decisions. Welcome to Nashua. Would you like to stay? You know,
Right.
that makes no sense. The business owners who came in and said, listen, you can only deal with what happens within the boundaries. They said, we're not against banning cigarette sales to children they're not children, adults under 21. However, you can't do it at just the municipal boundaries. We're
Right.
going to lose a lot of business because guess what? The person who goes out to buy the pack of cigarettes gets his 6-pack of Coke, he gets his bread, he gets all his other things. They do it in one trip. Now they're going to be driving to Hudson. And they're going to get that, and we're going to lose the business. We're going to be punished because of this. So, there were a lot of people that basically went in and said,
No.
getting a little too big for your britches here. This is not an issue that should be decided at the municipal level. You want to make the push to get it changed at the state level, that's fine. Take it up to Concord. Let's have, the discussion and we'll decide where to go. But this is just, let's take this, let's go to the other end of an adult's life. How about now, more elderly people, granted, they start you losing your physical motor skills and your reactions times. And I think you can say that towards the end of the life, people, they're not as good a driver. So should the city of Nashua say, something, anybody over 80 years old, you can't drive anymore? No, yeah, of course. Well, you're only about 62 now, right?
That's right.
Right. But and so, how would people react if the city of Nashua
Right.
suddenly said, well, you have a valid driver's license in New Hampshire, but you can't drive here?
Right.
I mean,
Yeah.
Yeah.
it's just crazy. So, as I
But
said,
again,
don't
it's-
smoke cigarettes, but damn it, this is not something that should be handled at the municipal level.
And it's one solution for everybody. You can't say everybody's the same.
Yeah, we're not all the same.
You don't age the same. You don't have physical traits the same. You don't have, reactions the same. But everybody wants to say, we got to regulate everybody by a certain pattern.
Well, I love this. It's almost, for me, it's like apocryphal. I wish I could go through the whole list, but it talked about the difference between conservatives and liberals.
Oh yeah,
Conservative doesn't want to smoke cigarettes, he doesn't buy a pack.
Right.
The liberal doesn't want to smoke cigarettes, nobody can buy cigarettes, you know. Conservative doesn't want to have a gun, he doesn't buy a gun. Liberal doesn't want to have a gun, nobody can have guns. And you can really, honestly, go down the list.
Right.
And that's exactly what I was seeing last night. It was that whole idea of, we think smoking is bad, you can't smoke.
How did the Board of Aldermen react to it? Was there a vote taken ultimately?
No, they actually referred it back to committee. It was an interesting thing because
What did the committee say about it? That brought it back to the full board.
they brought forward an amendment. Now, people were poking holes in the amendment because they basically said all of the enforcement is on the seller. The possession and use basically are toothless. So you can have it, but the guy can't sell it. And of course, then we'll go after the guy who's selling it. But you could still have it. So I hate to say this, but I think they decided to refer it back to the committee because they were going to up the sanctions. They decided, well, maybe we do have to punish everybody after all.
Oh my
So I'm
goodness.
still, I am unconvinced that they walked away with hearing what I heard and the takeaway I had, which is this is just a gigantic municipal
tweaking
overreach.
it so it gets by next time.
Yeah.
Well, if what you point out is a good example of the differences between conservatives and liberals or Republicans and Democrats, that board is 100% Democrat.
Mhm.
And so
Oh, yes.
they're going to want to come back, as is the mayor, want to come back and maybe impose something.
I'm afraid that's what's going to happen. I mean, I think, everybody showed up for this one. They pushed it off to the side, said we'll deal with this later. And I'm wondering if they're just going to wait for a night till they wear people down. And it could
Well,
be brought
that
back
happens
up
a lot. They do like to, just kind of wait them out.
Well, it's going to be interesting running because the aldermen are up for election. The Board of Education's up for election.
Yes, they
this
are.
year.
Yep.
So by June, we should know whether we have some people in there. I think our listeners should be listening to us and getting some information. And if anybody wants to run, come to the Republican Club meetings every second Thursday of the month.
I recommend reading George Farrington's column too, because he talks about the characteristics
Right.
of an effective person on the Board of Ed. And I think that they get embroiled in the wrong things and on both sides. And I would like to see some people who are constructive, who are focused on the good of the kids and not trying to blame the kids, not just shifting blame, but taking responsibility. We need adults in the room taking responsibility and trying to find good solutions to all kinds of issues.
And the aldermen and the people on the Board of Education get paid more than the representatives that we're on the Concord.
Yes,
Yeah, they make the big bucks, right?
It does not much more, but it's significantly more. Takes care of some of your little expenses you have. But,
sure. But it's a big time commitment. I'm sure
Yeah.
being up in Concord, of course, is a big time commitment. But being on the Board of Ed or Board of Aldermen, it's a big time commitment. And
It is if you do it right.
if you do it right. Apparently, one of the things that George was talking about here is that there was a motion, or at least a discussion, about changing the Board of Ed's meetings from twice a month to once a month.
Yeah.
Apparently, they don't want to put in the time anymore. So
It's rather ironic considering the fact that they're in the bottom third and the costs are spiraling out of control. Let's have less oversight.
who says being in the bottom of third is good performance? I hear that all the time.
Yeah.
We have excellent schools. Well, we have some students who perform well.
Yes.
But if the majority doesn't, and it's the results of the majority that hold us down in the bottom of third, I don't think that's a good school system.
Well, they're looking at too at how we measure the accomplishments of the students right now. They're claiming that some students go for the AP classes just because they get a better weighted. The weight of that grade is more than it is for the regular ones or some of the manual training type of things. So they're trying to somehow balance that instead of trying to say, hey, this is meaningful the way we have it now. Instead, they're worried about, well, the kids are choosing the wrong ones because they just want to get a better overall GPA.
And why is that a bad thing if, it's going to help you get into the school of your
I
choice?
don't know, but that's that's the type of discussion again that you read about in the paper. Maybe you got to go there to really understand what they're saying, but it doesn't seem that the discussion is going the right way. It's like it's make things all easy for everybody.
Right.
I don't like that. I mean, that's
No, life's a challenge. We have to. We're supposed to be teaching our kids how to compete in the
that's
world,
right.
and I think that having challenges and competition within the schools is the best way for that kid to become
We do that in
prepared.
sports,
Absolutely right.
and we don't think that's bad.
Mm.
Well, yeah, I mean, the old, train hard and
Right.
game day is easy,
Right.
right? Because you're
Right.
ready for that, and it should be the same way academically
Mhm.
in terms of that. Train hard, and then your working career
And things come
will
a
be
lot easier to
much easier. Because
train for.
God, I think folks, those poor kids we're not doing them any favors.
No.
Because when they get into a highly competitive environment, they're just going to ask, what the heck is going on here? Because nobody's going to be nice to them anymore. They want them to produce.
And it could actually be a much more serious situation than just not doing well on a job. I teach people how to fly an airplane.
Yeah.
That's what I do. And would I be doing my student a disservice if I said, well, you know what? It's okay. You're good enough.
Yeah.
I'll just take care of that for you. You just go out and have a good time.
Yeah, you might bounce a little bit next time you're
It's
in the
okay.
plane.
You're
Well,
a
we don't
little
want that
shaky
to
in
happen.
bad weather flying, but
We don't want that.
you know.
We don't want that to happen at all,
Right.
because the consequences of not educating them
Right,
properly
right.
are very, very serious. And I think that we need to remember that the consequences of our national school district
Or
not
Okay.
educating those kids properly are very, very serious.
well, that's
Serious
one of the
consequences.
things that bothered me when I stopped seeing a report on how many people were taking what do you call it, special classes at the
Remedial classes.
classes at these this
Oh,
Community
junior
college,
and
yep.
college level.
Very, very large percentage.
Yeah.
Oh, and
But
that's
they
interesting.
changed the number. They changed the title too. They don't call them remedial classes anymore.
Ah,
But the amazing thing is, too, I was told, I think, an amazing statistic, which was, I think it was 75% of all student loan defaults were by children or, young adults who had to take those remedial classes because they just weren't ready.
Right.
So then they went into school being unready. They took on these huge loans and debts, and then they crashed and burned because they weren't adequately prepared. And then guess what? The loans and the debts don't go away. So now you get somebody who's out,
Yeah.
couldn't handle it, is out of the academic life, and suddenly has this huge monkey on his back, which is the student loans that they were happy to give him or her, to go into that
Sure.
kind of a situation. So again, that's another reason why we're not doing our students any favors if we're letting them graduate unprepared.
yeah, it's not good at all. So we need to focus on education, not on excuses.
Right, right.
And folks at home, as they're considering who to vote for this fall, should be listening for that in a candidate.
Or some of them want to get involved and
Get
help
involved
out.
themselves.
I
Absolutely.
think that's necessary. We need to do better.
Yep, that's right.
And both in Nashua and in Concord.
Mhm.
So we'll see what happens.
Mhm, mhm.
Well, we'll be talking about a number of these things as we go along. So I think we do these types of discussions now once a week,
Mhm.
either on a Wednesday or a Thursday, and they show up on YouTube. And then they're also on Channel 96 here in Nashua, so people want to see some of those things, and they could go back to, if they want to see old ones, they can go to NashuaGOP.org and see all of them way back for a couple of years if they wanted to go back that see if we changed anything. Well, hopefully we'll have more information next week, unless you want to continue with do you have any other items you want to bring up?
What else was going on in Concord? What did I see about students in sports? About being allowed to compete in the sport by their choice of gender.
Oh, that is one big question now. It's becoming something in some of these universities requiring that a person can go in and declare the opposite sex. and just be competing in the sports.
The people who are going to suffer the most are actually the women,
Yeah.
because they are, in terms of, when it comes to physical strength, speed, and everything else, let's face it, the XY helps. And they have an unfair advantage. So, I mean, it's the issue of sports. It's just crazy. I mean, the other thing too was, and in terms of women, like for buying life insurance, women live longer than men. So guess what? There's one of the times you actually get a break when it comes to buying a service, especially like a life insurance policy or something. That's going to go out the window, because you're not going to be able to have that kind of gender discrimination. Because let's face it, if I want to identify as a woman, I want the lower rate. And when it comes to life insurance, I'm thinking about it. So it's a real shame. I think we've done a terrible disservice to a lot of people. And it comes, again, this is my personal bias here speaking, but I don't think we're even doing the people who want to identify as the opposite gender a favor, because you're normalizing an abnormality in those people. And if somebody said that they could fly, would you be taking them up to a rooftop and say, hey, go for it?
Yeah.
Right?
No.
I mean, are you helping that person by encouraging what can ultimately be a very self-destructive behavior? And I don't think we are.
Well,
And we're seeing it they're trying to do it on the driver's license. Like, we're trying to remold society where somebody's personal view of reality becomes our objective reality that we all have to live with.
We have to conform
Yeah.
to this non-objective view of reality.
Yes.
and reaching a decision in the early years of a person's growing up is really, I don't understand that, how you can really believe that a 10-year-old knows what he wants to be, or how. And right now, I mean, last session we prohibited psychiatrists from talking to the people, not beating them up or anything like that, but just talking, trying to get the person to understand his emotions and stuff, and not necessarily trying to change him, trying to get him to understand himself a little bit more.
That's very interesting, because there's all this societal pressure
Right.
that comes to bear when you listen to the news
Right.
to cause someone to think, maybe I'm not how I was born.
Right.
There's a lot of pressure to cause a young boy to think maybe he's a girl, a young girl to think maybe she's a boy. But you can't have anyone come in and say, well, let's just think about this for a little bit. You can't do that. So kids are hearing one voice that seems to be encouraging this change, and not hearing another voice, legally hearing another voice that says,
Yeah.
you should stay as you are, or at least understand your emotions.
I voted against that. I'm sure you did too,
Yeah.
because I think it was wrong. You're doing those confused children, a terrible disservice. We're supposed to be the adults in the room, and we're supposed to try to help them get it through a difficult period. And, at the end of the day, it's going to be what it's going to be. But to say that you literally cannot talk about something to somebody when this is the central point of the issue itself.
In some
is
cases, they'll
wrong.
take your child away too, which is, I don't understand that at all.
Wow.
Well, we'll see what happens with the sports issue,
Yeah.
because if men are allowed to compete in women's sports and women in men's sports, and we just don't have women in men's sports anymore, it's just sports, and
Right.
anyone can be on whatever team they want, and I think we'll see mostly male-dominated teams, because as you say, there's historically and
And
genetically, it seems to be an advantage.
What's wrong with having single-sex type of organizations? You have societies that are like that. They're all men or they're all women. I mean,
Fraternities, sororities, those kinds of things.
yeah, some of the colleges make sure they want you mix
Freedom
them.
of association.
Yeah, absolutely
Which is
right.
like,
Well, that bothers me too. Yeah, that's if you're supposed to have some of these things grouped. But what happened to my right for freedom of association? I mean, you're not right or wrong all the time. You have certain preferences, and they're your preferences.
yes, they are.
And that's what we're supposed to be able to live with, as long as we don't alienate somebody else. Discrimination should have a common definition, not one that varies so that somebody can say, oh, you're a racist. you know, or you're a whatever. They don't, when they set up these special classes, they're separating people. They're causing a discrimination just because you're identifying different groups like that.
Well, I mean, I've got a house with a door and a lock,
Yeah.
and I close the door sometime and I lock it. And I get to decide who comes in through my door
Right.
into my own space.
Right.
And so why aren't we looking at this the same way in terms of like that kind of association?
That's
I can
right.
invite you to my house because I like you. I can invite you to my house because I like you. It's my house.
Right.
It's my rules.
Right.
Why do I have to allow anybody in just because they want to? Where are the boundaries again? Where is their idea of private property? You're free with your own time. You could, you know, a freedom to associate by definition means freedom to disassociate.
Right.
I want to spend my time with you two. I don't want to spend my time with that person. Again, it's the dignity of
it's your
free
choice.
Yeah, it should be.
Yeah.
Should be.
Well, I don't know. As you say, they're trying to make one uniform gender. I don't see that.
Wow. Do you want to talk about that article?
Oh
about-
yeah, why don't you?
If I may.
Sure.
I really thought this was a really, really well-written article. It's by Representative Howard Pearl, and he's from Loudon and Canterbury. And it was called My Turn, Voter Fraud in the Canary of Canterbury. Now, for those of you out there who don't know, New Hampshire is really almost evenly divided between Democrats and Republicans at this point. The elections are very close, and they sometimes turn on just one or two votes
Yeah.
in terms of this. So he was talking about the importance of making sure that only people who should be eligible to vote in New Hampshire, that they're the only ones who can vote in New Hampshire. And we have a real problem here.
We do.
And we've been trying to fix it. I don't think we've gone anywhere far enough. But at this point, unfortunately, the Democrats are trying to roll back even the modest changes we've tried to make to make sure that New Hampshire citizens are not being disenfranchised.
Right.
Because I think that's what's
And
happening.
having one common definition.
Yes. So he talked about this in terms of, so one of the towns he represents is Canterbury. And in the last election, I think he said there were 114 same-day registrations in Canterbury, this small little town in New Hampshire. Well, they decided they were going to do an outreach and bring people in. So he made a point of trying to contact each one of those 114 same-day registrants to invite them to come to the get-together. He said a lot of the letters he sent came back saying there's no such address,
Yeah, no such street.
no such street.
Yeah.
You know, and then the other ones, folks that he tried to reach out to, the short of it is zero.
Right.
Not one single person showed up for the outreach after him trying to. I mean, it's almost impossible statistically to have that happen. So it really makes you wonder how many of those 114 folks really were there to begin with. And this is just one little small town in Canterbury.
Small town, 114 votes can make a huge difference.
Oh yeah.
Well, when you think about what happened at the senatorial level, Kelly Ayotte lost by 1,500 votes
Right.
right across the entire state. Donald Trump lost to Hillary Clinton by 3,000. That was less than the number of same-day registrants that came in on that day. And nobody has been really chasing this down to find out, were they really here and did they really stay? And he did give one other statistic that I thought was pretty amazing. And he said in the college towns, Durham, Keene, Hanover, and Plymouth, we don't know exactly how everybody, individually voted, but he said that in terms of who they voted for, the vote was 19,128 to 5,215 in terms of 19,000 voted for Democrats, 5,200 voted for Republicans. 4-1 in terms of what happened there. And when you look at that, that's 15,000 votes. That's more than the margin of victory, much more than the margin of victory for Hillary Clinton and Maggie Hassan over the other candidates.
So if there were 2,000 or 3,000 voters in that block who were in those college towns who should not have voted in New Hampshire because they voted elsewhere or have residency in some other state, that sways an election.
we have a Democrat senator because I think of what happened here. So I guess the folks in New Hampshire just have to decide, do we really want to get serious about this And one of the things we need to do that is to defeat the Democrat initiatives, which is basically to throw open the doors to anybody to
Yeah.
vote here.
Well, then the 2012 election here in Nashua, Nashua had over 7,000 people sign up to vote on election day.
God.
7,000. I know there were close to 1,000 in my ward.
Yeah.
Alone, and
Those are huge numbers.
and that overturned. I mean, I think it was something like, if I took the next election, just took a sample and sent out like 200 first class, and at least 35% came back no such address.
Wow.
You know,
Wow.
from
Yeah.
someone like that. And it's something that we got to look into. They are
Yes.
looking into a little bit more, and I hear that there's something that the Attorney General of the state's going to report on soon.
Good.
gonna be
Well, I hope they look
interesting.
into it. And, we get accused of saying, well, there's widespread voter fraud, and Democrats will say, there's no bus loads. Well, just like we've said, you don't need bus loads.
Yeah.
You need a few thousand. And maybe in Canterbury, they needed 114.
Uh-huh.
Maybe they only needed 10, but they got 114. But this happen. It does happen. It happens because we have very, very lax rules on who's
And
allowed
you
to
see
vote
at
here.
every election how many recounts there are.
Right.
That's how close it is for some of these
Very, very
towns.
close.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of people that comes down to a single. I know in my ward there are two. The third person that got elected at 3 elections in a row only won by less than 25 votes.
Mm,
Wow.
those are big issues.
Well, we've run out of time finally,
Already.
gentlemen, and we'll be seeing each of us, I guess, again in another week or two.
Yep. Sounds good.
And we'll get together and talk about something that happened up in Concord, I believe. We'll see
Oh,
how
yeah.
valuable that is.
All right.
Okay. Well, thank you
Thanks.
again for your time. And thank you for listening in. And come to the Republican committees and the Marriott the second Thursday of every month. Thank you.
The preceding program was provided by an independent producer solely responsible for its content. The opinions expressed do not necessarily represent the views of this station, its staff, board of directors, or underwriters.